All right, everybody. This is Lisa Vasquez with Memento Mori Inc. And I'm here with Matt. So, Matt, would you go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers?
Oh, hi. My name is Matt Forgit. I am a author from New England. Um, I live in Massachusetts, and I have a couple of books out. And thank you for having me as a guest on the show.
No problem. So, the first thing I want to do is just dive right in. Can you show me your book and what you want to focus on today?
Yeah, sure. So this is my current novel. It's called The Felicitous. It came
Nice.
out recently. Um, it's a story. I'm a lifelong horror fan, so I write horror novels, usually with some humor in them. This one is kind of an homage to 70s cult movies and 80s slashers and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes and my beloved Final Girls, because I'm a big fan of the final girl trope in horror films and strong, intelligent, brave, resourceful, capable women. So it's kind of got all those things for people and with some humor.
Always got to have a little bit of humor to break it up. I love a little
Yeah.
bit of humor in there. I noticed that the trend now is to have a lot of humor in it, like X-Men, those kind of movies. Just
Yeah.
throw in humor. A lot of the horror movies are just throwing in humor, and sometimes it's not done correctly, and it just breaks the whole. You're like, man, this was a
Yeah.
suspenseful, scene, and you just threw that in there, and it took me out of it. Do you feel like when you do horror, you have that challenge as well?
That's such a great question because I think about this all the time. I take a lot of conversations that the characters in my books have from actual conversations I have with friends. And a lot of, when you're close with people, you have very humorous, weird interactions that you would have with friends. And I always worry that I want the horror scenes to be taken seriously. Like the violence and the gore should be taken seriously and
Mhm.
suspenseful and scary. And I want to scare you. So I always tread that line very carefully. I think very hard about um, I don't want I don't want you laughing when someone dies. I want you to be afraid. I want you to care for them. Um, so I try to keep the humor within the context of conversations or within kind of a character motivation, like they're kind of a goofy person, but I want you to feel the terror when something terrible is happening to them.
Right, and sometimes we deal with terrible things with humor, like, that kinda gets us through
Mhm.
a little bit, and everybody deals or copes with tragedy or terror in different
Mhm.
ways, so I think that nowadays it's very common for us to deal with it with humor. For example, I think one of the best, lines was, "Oh, I'm going to, be kinda lost here for a second because I had a brain fart," but,
It happens.
Norman Reedus was in there. I'm gonna totally we'll come back to it because
Okay.
now I just totally had a brain fart of it, but he basically the cat gets shot and he's like, "Is it dead?" Like, like
Yeah.
something like that. But I feel like when you get into scenes where you deal with horror, as long as it's done in a realistic way, deep
Mhm.
sarcasm kind of works for you, right?
I
So
agree.
now that I've done my own take you out of the scene, tell us a little bit about your book then, and let us know about what your book is about, and then tell us a little bit about the inspiration for it, other than the
Sure.
ones you've already mentioned.
No, absolutely. So, the lead character in the novel, the main character is Annie. She has had kind of a rough go of things, and she discovers that there's a ghost town available for sale. And I actually did a lot of research on ghost towns for the book
Okay.
because I had a lot of people tell me that's not a thing. You can't buy a ghost town. And I said, oh no, do some research online. You can find lots of ghost towns that are very cheap to buy. So I thought, how cool. I've always wanted to see a ghost town, let alone live in one. So I thought, how cool would it be if we set up this character? She's had a really tough time. Her husband's just passed away. He's been murdered. So she's dealing with a lot of things. Um, I always like the things I write about to have some kind of social realism where we deal with so much violence in real life. All the violence in here obviously is fantasy, which I think helps cope with real life violence. But she goes to this ghost town and weird stuff starts to happen. And then they learn she's having her aunt and her friends visit, and they learn that this used to be where a very angry, mysterious, violent cult used to live. And some things start to happen, and I don't want to give too much away. I try to play it. I want you to not know 100% what's going on. Like, are they back? Is it the ghosts? Is it in Annie's head? So I try to play with that a little bit. And there's some surprises and some. I definitely write things in a mystery way. I like to have things uncovered as you read. So that's
Okay.
the inspiration came from. I actually follow a channel on YouTube. The man, it's a man who lives in a ghost town, and he documents his. And I'm so fascinated by it. So I always had this idea of like, how cool would that be?
Yeah, for sure. And when you talk about a ghost town, like people moved out for a reason. Like all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing there. So we never know why, right?
Right.
So it's a mystery as it goes. And having a little bit of those breadcrumbs lead you on the way to revealing what's happening is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun as well. So that's pretty cool. You had mentioned, having a strong female lead. And you
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of inspiration from 70s and 80s kind of horror slasher films. Who's your favorite leading lady?
Oh, um, there are so many. I'm gonna try to list them quickly so I don't bore you. Ripley from Alien and Aliens, Alice, Ginny, Chris, and Trish from the first four Friday the 13th,
Mhm.
Sally from Texas Chainsaw, Nancy from Elm Street, Sydney and Gail from Scream, Regina and Samantha from Night of the Comet. I know I'm forgetting somebody. I'm going to be mad at myself later because there's so many that I like. Oh, Alice from A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5, Rachel from Halloween, Lori from Halloween.
Mhm.
The kind of the classics, the ones that were just so strong and so smart. And I find it fascinating that people will be like, well, someone saved them. But I don't feel like a lot of them get saved. They did it themselves. Like someone might have come in at the end and helped out. But we're with these women who they're capable. Like they're not the
Right.
biggest fighters, but they learn to fight back. And I really like that about horror. That's something that's always attracted me to horror films. Jess in
Mhm.
Black Christmas is another one.
Yeah.
Um, they don't start off like these strong Wonder Women, but they're smart and they use their brains. And I always try to write my characters. A lot of the women in the book, I always make sure that I don't want them just to be there because they're someone's boyfriend or because I want them to have their own autonomy. Um, that's important to me as a writer. I
Right.
want my nieces and nephews when they're old enough to read my books. I want them to see, you know, that it's not it's I feel like horror is such a great genre for women and
Yeah.
for people who are the other.
Right. And I think it's funny that people would say that when, how many horror movies have we watched where all of a sudden they pick up a gun and they're a sharpshooter, right? Like,
Right. Right.
especially
Right.
men, they pick up a gun and then, they know how to do martial
Yep.
arts and they're doing all
Yep.
this stuff. And, and then you get a woman who's capable and they're like, well, she was saved at the end or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
she survived, through
Yes.
the whole thing by some
It's so
miracle
true.
to get to the end to be saved. So,
Yep.
Ripley is probably one of my favorites
Oh,
because
forever.
she really wasn't fighting. Like she knew how to work, a crane thing, right?
Yep. Used her
But
brain.
yeah, she used her brain and she kind of used common sense, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, she outwitted the android, but
Yep.
it really brings to me, it brings a layer to horror where I feel like I want to know more about that character, but
Hmm.
I actually feel like it brings that believability, that suspension of belief
Hmm.
that, this could really happen. So I appreciate when people bring in an intelligent character because I really don't like, you know, of course, we love movies like, where it's pretty funny you have Ash and all this, right? But for me, I really feel like there's a time and place, where funny horror, comedy horror
Hmm.
is one thing. Like bringing comedy into horror is one thing, but comedy horror is a
I
separate
agree.
slot. And so there's a time and a place where I'm like, oh, I'm not really in the mood for it. So when you bring in characters that are really in depth, like I want to watch those movies over and over again, right? Or I want to
Hmm.
read that book over and over again to really get into that character's mind. Like, I mean, I'm going in the other direction with like a male person, but like Hannibal for me is a deep character that I want to dive into. So when you bring a female character into your books like you have, then I really want to explore that character more and read it again and again. And then when the next book comes out, go back to the first one and read it again before I dive into
Right.
the second one, right?
I agree.
So tell me about some upcoming appearances that you have going on.
Well, it is the Horror Depot's AuthorCon. It is on Saturday, March 23rd.
Hmm.
It's at Rhode Island College Student Union. So I'll be signing there. I'll be there signing books. There's going to be a ton of authors there. There's like 35 authors and comic book
Beautiful.
artists. It's a horror writer, horror comic event. It's actually my first signing ever, so I'm pretty excited. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I have like boxes of books behind me in my house. Just all kinds of great stuff. I was very honored to be asked to come as a New England writer. It's celebrating the writers of New England who write horror stories, and I can't wait. I hope people will come and say hi.
Yeah, for sure. As a new author, it's always daunting when you go to these things because you're like, is anybody going to
Mhm.
come to my table, right?
Yes.
But I love your cover. I think it would draw me in immediately. Who's your cover
Oh.
artist?
Actually, it's my better half. My better half has done both my
Oh,
book covers. I'm
excellent.
very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate. Here, I'll show you. This is the first book because The Felicitas is my second book. That's my
Uh-huh.
first one.
Love it.
And he did both covers for me. So
Uh-huh.
I'm very fortunate in that respect. I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay someone to do my books. Yeah.
At
I'm
least
just like,
dinner,
hey, I,
right?
I need you to read this. Yeah. I need you to do a cover. You have 4 weeks, so
Yeah.
I'm very lucky.
Very lucky because book covers are really hard, right? It's a
Yeah.
miss. It's a hit or miss with them sometimes, but I
Oh
think they
yeah.
did a fantastic job with it. So I think you're going to at least get people to come by and say, "I really want to know more about that." And
I hope.
what was the first book about? The other one, what was that one about?
So the first one is actually a horror comedy set at Christmas.
Okay.
So I that's how I launched it out of the gate. I have an obsession for Hallmark Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Um, I've seen them all. I love
Mhm.
them. I love them so much. So I thought to myself, what would happen if there was a Hallmark Christmas movie and a slasher showed up? So that was the genesis of that book. And then I wrote that. And then I took a step back because I needed to, it takes a lot out of you to write a book.
Yes.
I am in awe of these authors who can write 10 books a year. I don't have that in me. I have to focus on the book, and I have work, and I have life, and I have school, and I have my friends and my family and my nieces and nephews. And so I don't have all the hours I need to. And that's not a complaint. It's just I
Right.
don't I don't have that time. So each book takes me a little bit of time. So I had to take a break after that one, started the next one, which is the Felicitas.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it's just I'm slow going. I'm not at the 10
Yeah.
books a year yet. So
I don't know if I will ever be that way. I've been as long as I've been writing, I feel the same way. Like I feel like there needs to be sort of a break because I'm coming out of an entire world. So when I immerse
yes,
myself into that book,
yes,
like to me it's exhausting. I can write for, 4 or 5 hours at a time, but when I'm done, I'm so
yes.
mentally exhausted. So are you like
It's
that
so
too? Where you're
true.
just like, I can't for the rest of the day, I'm done, right? I'm pretty much done.
Yes.
So and you have to work full time. I have a day job, it's like these people that are able to do it, these authors that are able to do it, I give them high kudos because
Me too.
the brain
I
power
Yeah, I,
necessary
I
is
follow some
ridiculous.
authors who are like, I swear they have a new book every 3 months, and I want to
Yeah,
write them and be like, teach me how to do this,
yes,
teach me your
yes,
ways.
exactly. So answer me this, like how do you go from one book and like obviously one world, how do you prepare yourself to go into the next one?
So I love that's a great question. I'm a prolific note taker. I write notes about everything. If you saw I'm talking to you from my writing desk. If you
Hmm.
saw my writing desk and how many notes are on this, and on my computer and on my phone, I write everything down, and then I organize it all as I go. Because you know how it is when you write. You start off with one direction, but as the story unfolds, sometimes things change.
Yes.
So I have all my notes. I'm always writing outlines. I like to be prepared, but I also like if the story's taking me in a different direction or I come up with a great idea. um I have, oh God, it's sometimes some days I'm so like, why am I like this? um, but other
Yeah.
days it helps because it helps me remember all the things, like I conversations I have or things I see, or just like ideas for a scary scene, and I'm like, oh, I gotta write that down.
Hmm.
um and then I just try to put it all together the best I can. I think you probably relate to this and other authors, how much work actually goes into writing a book,
Right.
you know.
Right. And like I said, you're immersing yourself into a whole world that you have to remember. You have to
Mhm.
remember names. You have to remember
Yes.
where down the block that thing is that you mentioned in chapter 4, right?
Yes.
So in touching on that, do you feel like sometimes you get like analysis paralysis? And then how do you overcome that when you get stuck in there?
I love that you bring this up because this is one of my biggest problems is I'll have 10 drafts of the same story or book, and I will literally forget what I said about someone in chapter 4, and now we're on chapter 18. So thank God I have good editors who will be like, hey, you just said, like in the last book, I had given an age for a character, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
they were way younger. And my editor was like, what's, they were like, that's probably 6 drafts ago.
Yeah.
Um, and you know how it is too. What's crazy is that we're only human, so there are
Hmm.
things that I don't catch sometimes, and there's things that sometimes editors don't catch.
Right.
So, uh, I'm trying to think of one. There was one where oh darn it, where somebody online pointed it out to me, and I can't remember it, but I fixed it, and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that's like good feedback. Like you're like, thank you,
Right. I think that brings us, full circle into like beta readers and alpha readers.
Mhm.
And, sometimes as authors, like I said, we kind of get stuck in that analysis paralysis, but that goes beyond just writing the story. It goes
Yes.
like planning your story, marketing, because,
Mhm.
indie authors have to do all of this for ourselves. It's a full time job,
Absolutely.
right? So you're
It's
putting
so
so
true.
many hats on, and you're like, okay, well, I'm supposed to be focusing on my story, but I should probably do some marketing on this and I should do that.
Yes.
So you kind of get stuck in your own chasing your tail
Yes.
thing. And so, being really organized, I feel, you probably laugh because you're like, why am I like this? But being
Yeah.
organized, you probably keep your sanity, I would think, right?
Yeah. I
Hmm.
try. I try really
I
hard.
try. It's like I try. Yeah. So, what are some of the like? Do you use software? Or do you just use Microsoft Word? How
I
do you
use
do it?
Microsoft Word. Yeah, I'm a
Mhm.
Word guy, so I write everything. I also, like I said, since I take so many notes, I have so much stuff handwritten out. And
Yes.
so when it comes time to type it up, a lot of times I have like an idea of where I'm going and what I'm doing, and I'll type it out like 100 times. Um, yeah, I go through many, many drafts of
Mm.
stories, but I am not very technologically proficient.
Yes.
Word is about all I can handle. I love all the things you brought up because I'm actually very bad at social media. And I
Mhm.
think part of my issue is that I don't even know how to promote myself, or like I'm just not good at those things. Like social media is fine. I appreciate all the nice people I've met. I'm just not good at it.
Right.
So, like,
I think that's something that a lot of us authors, because most of us are introverts.
mm,
So for me, personally, I really just practiced, honestly. My
mhm.
first convention, I threw up,
Oh my
because I
God.
was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, this is so intense. And it was probably my biggest one. So I actually got to sit next to Joe Lansdale.
Oh
And so
wow,
that was
that's
my
big.
first one, and I was like, "Okay, so there's all these people because really because of him." But, all these people
Yeah.
were in there, but it was actually a panel that I had put together. And so they, it was this big convention and they were like, "Yeah, we wanna do it. We're gonna stick people on your panel." I'm like, "Yeah, do whatever. Here, whatever." So, but after it was all over, I was so amped up and just anxious. I just went to the bathroom and threw up. But
Oh God.
going after that, it was just keep practicing, Lisa, just keep practicing. And then, of
Right.
course, I came up with the persona, the queen, right? So I'm just like, oh, just put the crown on, baby. You're good, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's,
And that's
fake it
really,
till you make
yeah,
it. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Because I think no
yes,
one's harder on ourselves than we are. Like every
precisely.
bad thing you can say to me, I've already said to myself 10 times
Yeah,
today, you
right.
know?
Yeah. So my advice, and then I want to hear yours, but my advice is again, just to every like for new authors and for veterans alike, I always say, get a schedule on your social media and then schedule out your posts. So you don't even have to focus on it that day if you just want to write or you just
Mm,
want to do something else. You just schedule out that post and then just respond, like take an hour of the day and just respond to some of the answers that you get. What would be your advice, like looking at yourself right now? And I know you're still pretty new, but if you could answer something to your beginning self, the one that was like,
mm.
I'm going to do this, what would you say to them?
I love that question. One thing I would tell myself is not to take everything everyone says personally. I think that's a big one because it's the internet, and I had to learn that like it's not personal,
Yeah.
people and people are very much allowed their opinions because there's things I don't like and there's things that I love too. And I think for social media, I'm getting better at it. I think it's reminding myself that hey, today you got to make this post, like reach out to this person, or you know sometimes I'll just see these very capable people who are online all day long, and I don't have that privilege, unfortunately, sometimes.
Yes.
So I didn't need to be like, okay, you have 5 minutes, make a little post.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's really good advice is to not get caught up in the social media as well, because it is a time suck, right? It's kind of like when you get into that rabbit hole, like stay away from social media as much as possible, but you still have to be on it. It's ridiculous, right?
Right.
Like you have to be all about it, but then you have to stay away from it at the same
Right.
time. How we do it, it's magic. I don't know.
I need a
But
marketer. I need someone who can do that full time for me.
wait,
It's no
your
pay,
partner
but if
can't do
anybody
it?
wants
Like
to apply.
he does
Yeah.
your book covers. He can't do the marketing too.
Right. Yeah. Oh, he could. Yeah. I mean, I should be like, listen, this is your job now. Um,
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about it before we wrap up. I would like to hear about what your social media is. Do you have like a website? Where are you most active and where should we look to find you?
on Facebook, look under Matt Forgit, author. I am on Instagram under Matt Forgit. That one I don't have public yet, just because I get a lot of. Do you ever get these weird bots who friend you?
Yes.
So I don't like having that one public because. But if you send me a friend request and you know me, just send me a little note. I'm happy to be friends with you. I love people who read my books and readers and people who love books. I totally want to be friends. And I have a Blue Sky, so it's
Okay.
Matt Forgit at Blue Sky.
Okay. And not a website yet, right? We're working on that.
I have one. I literally think I signed up for it 2 years ago and then never looked at it again. I'm getting
Okay.
there. I'm gonna work on it. I
Gotcha.
promise.
Later. Let
Yeah.
get the book out first. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we definitely look forward to seeing you at your live events. Hopefully, there'll be a lot more. I know that we met through Books of Horror, so I hope that if
Yes.
you're not a part of Books of Horror, you guys join up and see Matt and there. We're pretty active in there, and it's a lot of fun for fans and readers of horror. And it was really nice talking to you and getting to know you. And I hope that we continue and I see a lot more from you.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's very nice.
Very nice to meet you. And again, we will talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.